Well, hello everyone and welcome to a very, very special episode of Wild Your Garden, because today I'm sat with a very special person in a very special location. Now, the reason we're cowering almost underneath this information board is because the man to my right is rather well known in many worlds actually for his interest in entomology and also many TV appearances, which we are going to talk about today, along with a lifetime of nature conservation. The man I'm sat with is George McGavin, if you didn't already know. George.
Good morning, Joel. How are you?
I'm very good, and all the better for being sat here, which is a slightly special spot, is it not?
Well, I can hardly believe I'm sitting here actually, because we're sitting, as you know yourself, meters from where the hull of the HMS Beagle rests in the mud here. I cannot believe that I'm this close. I could almost reach out and touch it.
Well, I've got a spade on the back of the van.
Let's make a start.
We'll make a start. So the reason we are here, as George just alluded to, is because we are right at the site that was the last known site for the HMS Beagle, which was, I would say, probably the most important ship in our history. Isn't it, George?
I would say the HMS Beagle holds its own among the pantheon of important vessels that we've ever built. Absolutely. And
there's a certain chap that sailed on it, wasn't there?
Charles Darwin and Admiral Fitzroy, or then Captain Fitzroy. I mean, one of the most influential voyages, as it turns out, that there has ever been. And why it was allowed to be moored on the Roach as a customs ship and then be towed here and basically broken up partly is beyond me. And I have to say, if I had a large sum of money, and there are many people out there, yes, I'm looking at you,
watching this,
who has got millions and millions to burning a hole in your pocket. Let's get this thing out. Let's because it's still there. The hull is still there. All the top bits have been removed for barn construction or firewood or whatever else happened to it. But the hull's still there. We could build a dam around that, get all the silt out, and we could get HMS Beagle back.
But the best hole in the ground I've ever dug.
I think it'd be fantastic, and I hope somebody is watching this who's got a silly amount of cash just waiting for something good to for it to be useful.
You'd need a few spades, wouldn't you? Because I think it's 5 to 6 meters below the level of the silt at the moment.
So it's 5 to 6 meters below, and it's probably a lot further down than that. But I still think if you were to build an iron sheeting dam around it and just blast it with fluid, get all the silt out, suck it all out, you could eventually get the whole hull. I mean, I think it'd be absolutely phenomenal to actually get that back.
Oh, for sure.
Into a museum and actually see it and touch it, and
and this sign is a recent addition actually of where the site, because before you could have walked past here and we would have had no idea. But it's incredible, because this ship is a ship that was sailing around the world, well, best part of 200 years ago, isn't it?
And it was a freak that Darwin was, of course, on the ship. I mean, the Admiralty thought, well, it'd be rather good to have a naturalist on board. Let's see if we can find one. And Fitzroy at the time was rather interested in the Victorian science, or not science, of phrenology, looking at the bumps and lumps on your face, which would denote something of your character. Well, he took against the shape of Darwin's nose when they met, and he said, "Oh, I don't like this guy. No, he's not very trustworthy sort of chap, But happily, thank goodness, he thought better of it, and Darwin went off on the voyage, because he got very seasick. I mean, he really didn't like being on the high seas at all very much. And as soon as it reached land, he spent actually more time on foot in South America than he did on the ship, because he would go off and travel to the next port and then he'd be picked up. But of course, the things he saw, and here is the critical thing, the things he saw began to make him think, actually, the received wisdom of creation just doesn't hang together. It just doesn't work. And of course, the reason he didn't publish Origin of Species for so long, I mean, he hung on to it for 20 years or so, he said, why, it is almost like confessing to a murder. He knew that he was flying in the face of everything that was known and believed.
Religion being the biggest barrier.
Religion being the biggest barrier. And of course, I was very fortunate for a large part of my career to be the curator of entomology and assistant curator in the Oxford University Museum of Natural History, which was opened late in 1859.
Right.
And
So just before.
New building. This was the science building for Oxford. This is where all the sciences were. Up until then, Oxford had, theology and literature and all this stuff. But mathematics and algebra and astronomy were all, geology and stuff. And they decided eventually that they would have to have a building for the sciences. And that's where all the sciences were taught. Of course, in those days, 1860, an honours class would be very small, 1 or 2 or 3 people. And now it's hundreds in each faculty, so it's impossible. So the whole of the Oxford science area grew up from that one nucleus. Wow. But in 1860, in June 1860, the British Association for the Advancement of Science met in Oxford that year. And Origin of Species, of course, had sold out its first print run. It was into its second print run, and they wanted Darwin to be there at this, rather big meeting.
Yeah.
Well, he wasn't able to go. He was sick. He almost certainly acquired a few interesting diseases on his voyage, but he might have suffered from other things. But anyway, he was unable to go to Oxford that day. He was at Dr. Lane's hydropathic emporium somewhere in Surrey or Essex. I can't remember exactly where, but he didn't go. But the event took place, and it's not recorded. There are no contemporary accounts of what actually happened. It's often billed as a great debate. It probably wasn't really a debate at all.
Sure.
But it was at that event, that warm afternoon in Oxford, when Samuel Wilberforce, the Bishop of Oxford, turns to Huxley, a great advocate of Darwinism, of evolution, and said to him angrily, "Is it on your grandfather's side or your grandmother's side that you are descended from an ape, sir?" And Huxley said, the Lord had delivered him into my hands. Unfortunate irony there. But he said he would sooner be descended from an ape than from an educated man who employed a divine to stifle the truth. Yeah. Well, according to some accounts of the time, the Bishop of Worcester's wife turned to her husband and said, "Oh, my dear, we must pray it is not true. But if it is, we must hope it does not become widely known," and promptly fainted, all this stuff. But what was really interesting for me, and relates to this site here, is that Fitzroy, now Vice Admiral Fitzroy, I think, was in Oxford on that day, and he heard about the event. He went along, and he was horrified. He heard all this stuff on evolution and, throwing everything that he believed in to the winds, and he apparently held up a King James Bible and shouted above the noise, the hubbub, "If I had known I had carried on my ship such a man as this," and his final words were drowned out. Both sides claim victory. It is evolution, of course, is one of the most powerful, the most original, the most far-reaching ideas that has ever occurred to a human being. And of course affects absolutely everything. It explains a lot of stuff about the world, and I think AI will evolve. AI will evolve just like we and other animals and species have evolved, and that may cause us a problem. But what an event! And that one of the reasons I stayed in Oxford for so many years was I couldn't bear to leave that room. I couldn't bear to be apart from it. I get it. The sense of history, and I'm getting exactly the same sense here.
Wow, yeah.
That here is the ship that carried Darwin to the other ends of the earth to get his idea.
Yeah.
Of course, there were others involved. I mean, Wallace independently had the idea.
Yeah. Alfred Russel Wallace, which is
Southeast Asia.
The connection I have to that, not personally, but Nicky is actually a descendant of Charles, who was a 16-year-old boy that travelled round with Wallace on his adventures around the world. So and here we are living in Essex, and of course my house is 10 minutes from here. So it's fantastic to have that connection. I'll say not myself, Nicky personally, but I think it's wonderful that I could bring you here and experience you experiencing.
I'm so
this.
grateful. I can't tell you how much it means to be sitting this close to the beagle.
Well, being a much lesser entomologist than yourself, I do get the connection. I understand, because it's an incredible, because that's of course where it all started for Darwin, wasn't it? He would go out and he would collect beetles and insects.
He was,
he
was a naturalist.
A ladybird on your head, George. So
on my head, son. He was a naturalist, and for a boy growing up, educated family of that, in that society, there were only a few jobs that he could have done. I mean, he could have gone into the church, he could have gone into
of course
the
his
law,
father tried to go into medicine. Yeah.
And he didn't like any of it. And in fact, his father said, "I despair of the boy ever achieving anything amounting to much." Oh, hello. So be warned, parents, when you think your child isn't going to achieve much. Just remember Darwin. Yeah. But I mean, he just loved natural history, and I think that's it was of its time. It would have been found. It would have been realised eventually. Well, there was enough evidence building up. I mean, how do you explain fossils? How do you explain extinct animals? All that stuff. It was the time when it was going to be found.
Yes, yeah. So how did your interest spark then? What was it? What sort of
mine just as a boy?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I grew up in Edinburgh.
Did you? I never guessed.
Yeah. I'll put the accent on if you want. Born in Glasgow, went to Edinburgh when I was 5. My father had a job that went over there. Went to a very good school. It was approved. No, that's an old joke. Only the old people will get that joke. But I liked school to a point. I had a very bad stammer as a kid. I mean, really bad. I mean, it's become quite fashionable now to reveal to the world that you've had a stammer, but I'm not sure that people really had the sort of one I had. It was a humdinger.
Really?
And by the age of 14, I was actually mute for a year. I didn't speak for a year at home or at school because there was no point.
Yeah.
And of course, an all-boys school is a very cruel place.
God.
If you're fat or you got glasses or you stammer, you're fair
Well,
game.
actually, whether people wish to believe this or not, but you were once ginger, weren't you? Like myself.
A bit of a red beard as a young man, yes, like yourself.
So being at school, being a ginger bird watcher, I was even in my childhood, at my time of life, it was it was still frowned upon, and still there were plenty of times I had the what's it taken out of me. And
absolutely.
I remember digress for 1 second. I did a talk in English once when I was about 12 or 13 about David Attenborough.
Oh, right.
Because I was, no doubt, like you, brought up on him, and you were, watching his shows and just being enthralled by everything that was thrown our way. And I was almost laughed at, and people thinking, why is he talking about wildlife and everything else? And here I am now with a career in wildlife, yourself with a career based around the natural world, and now who's laughing, George? Hey?
Like you, I mean, at school I didn't think there was anything more worthwhile than learning about the natural world. I mean, take all this away, take all the plants, well, what do you got left? You got bare rock, and not even all rocks, because some rocks are made of the remains of animals. So I mean, you have very little. And we are now, or we should be, completely aware that we are here but for the sake of the natural history around us, the biodiversity that we have.
Like we cannot exist in the background.
You cannot exist without all this stuff. Although people pretend that they can, of course. So learning about the natural world was all I wanted to do from a very early age. I did a degree in zoology at Edinburgh University. Went down
71, 75?
71, 75. You're very good. You've been doing your homework.
I did read a little bit.
75, 78, I did a PhD in entomology.
Yeah.
Eventually,
that was in London.
That was in London.
Did you then stay in London?
I stayed in London for a while. I then moved out to Hazelwood Park, which was the home of Imperial College's field station. I then eventually went to Oxford and I had my job there. Dream job. I mean, absolutely in charge of the insect collections at Oxford University, the second biggest collections in the UK. and with a huge amount of freedom to do whatever I wanted, teaching, research, curation, whatever. And to be in charge of the specimens, some of which are among the oldest specimens that exist. I mean, we have a specimen of the Bath white butterfly, which was collected in 1702. I mean, that
wasn't by Mr. Cole, was it?
Collected by John Charles. No, was it John Charles Dale? And then, it ended up in his collection.
Yeah.
But I mean, that was collected. That's probably the first pinned insect that exists, actually pinned on a pin for the purpose of being a specimen.
And now, of course, you've got to go to the continent to see Bathwhite, because it's a species that went extinct a long time ago, along with many other butterflies.
And that brings us to why I now say, with some feeling, that I wish I'd been an archaeologist or an astronomer, because I could probably have done that as well. Would have probably found that equally interesting. And all the stuff that I would be working on for the rest of my adult life would still be there. The pot shards would still be there. The stars would still be there, most of them. But I chose biology, and what I've witnessed in my lifetime is a slow diminishing, and not so slow actually, of the species, of the biodiversity. I mean, don't forget, it was only mid-80s that we first started to ask the question, how many species are there on Earth? And we don't have the foggiest idea. Not the foggiest idea. We think it might be between 5 and 8 million. We really don't know.
No.
Back then in the 80s, there was an early piece of work that suggested there might be 30 million, and then for about 10 or 15 years, scientists around the world were saying, oh yes, well, my research, 40 million and 50 million. Do I hear 55 million? 55 million, thank you. 70 million, and it went on. We simply don't know.
No.
And if you include bacteria and viruses, which of course are very hard to do anything about at all, we simply don't know. But we know, what we do know is that biodiversity is going down the drain. And there's really only one explanation for that, and that is that one species, Homo sapiens, who rose 250,000 years ago. So 250,000 years ago, Homo sapiens becomes anatomically identical to us now. And for a long, long time, we were hunter-gatherers. I mean, if the history from then was a 1,000-page book, right? It's a big book. It's only the last 10 pages or so that we stop being a hunter-gatherer. And we start farming. And that was really the start of the rot. The fact that you didn't have to hunter-gather, you didn't have to be that careful. The natural world could restore itself pretty quickly. There were very few of us. But then with agriculture, of course, and then the slow conquest of diseases, then, of course, the finding of coal and the success that we've had as a species globally. I mean, when I was born in 1954, there were 2.3 billion of us. There are now over 8 billion of us in the time that I've been alive. Now, you can't tell me that hasn't had an absolutely whackingly huge effect on the ecology of the planet, which we now know is pretty small and unique, actually. And what drives me up the blooming wall is we're still constantly harping on about sustainable growth. You can't have sustainable growth. The two words, you cannot put them together. You can be sustainable or you can have growth. And now we're on and on, economic growth, constant growth. This is why we're in this mess. This is why habitats are being razed from the face of the earth. This is why we're now in the middle of what is almost certainly the 6th mass extinction on Earth, driven almost entirely, if not exclusively entirely, by us.
It's quite ironic, really, isn't it?
Well,
and you would think, being supposedly the most intelligent species, we would be doing something
you would,
a lot
you?
different about it, wouldn't you?
You would.
If we were looking at the precipice of that, that drop off, which I know it may sound far-fetched to a lot of people. It may sound a bit dramatic, but you know,
it's not.
Scientists have been saying about this a long time, haven't they?
They have been saying it a long time. I mean, it's a problem that's been a while coming, obviously, and I'm going to have to stop here to put on a bit of sun cream. It is funny, you know, any country that has a falling birth rate, they go, panic, have more babies, come on, reproduce, we need more babies. But you see, the whole trouble, Joel, is that capitalism has been very good and it works perfectly well when there are relatively few of you.
Yeah.
And when you have enough stuff to go around. Well, of course, there comes a point when it doesn't actually work anymore. It doesn't work. You need a steady state system. You cannot keep on growing and growing and growing. I know the peak number of human beings may happen slightly earlier than it was predicted. It may reach about 10 billion and it might happen slightly earlier. But after that point, there has to be a reduction. There has to be a population reset. Yeah. And we cannot keep on going and going. There are lots of problems involved with it, of course, you know, because the way capitalism works, the way the world works is to make lots of money. Not always a bad thing, but it can be. And the reason that they need more people, the system needs more people, is because it needs consumers to buy stuff they don't actually need. And that will keep on rolling and rolling until there comes a time when you hit a brick wall. And that brick wall is the resources that you have.
Yeah.
You cannot go on. We have a finite amount of stuff. We're already using vast amounts of it.
Yeah. And
it's been estimated that we actually need an earth and a half, an earth and 3/4 to supply the needs of actually a relatively small amount of human beings. So 10% of the world's human beings are living ridiculously well-off lives, you know, and the bottom lot at the other end are surviving on hardly anything at all.
Yeah.
Global warming is again going to have a huge effect. So it's not just habitat loss. It's not just species loss. It's not just pollution, in which we are now polluted with plastics. I mean, the entire world. It's in deep sea trenches. It's in our blood. It's in our.
Yeah.
It's everywhere.
Yeah.
An invention, you know, barely 60 years old. It's now everywhere.
Yeah.
But global warming, we've now altered the environment. I remember as a kid, there was a program on Tomorrow's World. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah, yeah.
But there was a thought at the time, 70s, early 70s, that there might be an ice age around the corner. You know, oh, ice age, guys. Oh,
yeah.
Yeah. It's almost like
the fires on.
Let's burn as much fossil fuel as we can. Well, it's worked really well.
Yeah.
There's no chance of an ice age, unfortunately. Quite the opposite, in fact. And other problems arise. I mean, now large parts of the earth are going to be unsurvivable, unlivable.
Yeah.
Where are these people going to go? I wouldn't stay there and die.
No.
I would want to move.
Absolutely.
You're going to get migration, mass migration.
Yeah.
This is going to cause just the most horrendous, untold hardship.
Well, you've only got to look at the fires over the last few years, you know, in Greece and
it's the
California.
hottest year last year.
You
It
know,
was the hottest year on record.
Yeah, 39.1 degrees it got in my home county of Lincolnshire.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
crazy. Actually, no, I think it got to 41.3. Sorry, yeah, it got just over 40 degrees in Lincolnshire, which is never that hot. That's for sure.
It is.
It's something we can't avoid any longer, and I think for those out there denying
not.
it, I think it's foolish to think that the world will continue. You know, even if it's not our lifetime or our children's lifetime, you know, within a few lifetimes, it's going to be a very, very different place. And it's as you say, and as Attenborough said for many a year, it's more than just habitat loss and more than, you know, the climate change. It's population control.
Population control is right up there.
You know, and that's when you look at things like you and I do, and you look at that, you spend your life observing the natural world, and you see the degradation of it in your local area or whether it's on TV. It's hard not to then think to yourself, that's the big picture. This is it's about the planet. It's not just about, you know, whether the councils are mowing the grass down on my local park or not.
Although that is annoying.
That is annoying. That is very annoying. It's something I get very vocal about every year, which they still do it, I think, just to annoy me. But it's one of those things that you then have to think about a global picture, and that's where hopefully everybody watching this from around the world can spread that message.
Inequality is an enormous issue. I mean, the poorest of the poor want more. Of course they do.
Yeah.
The richest of the rich don't want to give any of it away.
No.
They just want to get richer. Yeah. I don't know why, because no matter how much cash you've got,
there's only so many boats you can sail, and you can only be in one house and one room at once.
And when it all goes up the Swanee, you know, you can sit on a bare rock with your big pile of cash. Not going to do you any good.
Yeah, that's right.
Not going to do you any good at all.
No, quite. Yeah, it's well, I mean, without sort of being too pessimistic, George. What are
the answers? Yeah. Well, no.
Well, I mean, what I was going to say was
really big asteroid would be good.
Well, yeah.
Really big one.
I mean, it's you know, jokes to one side.
That wasn't a joke.
No, but it's it would help, wouldn't it? I often think, you know, people do say to me, well, how can I best impact the planet? And you know, my realistic answer, if I wasn't holding back, would be, well, to not exist, you know. And I know I'm not asking for a mass exodus of people across the world, but you know, I'm by simply existing, we are using resources, and to, you know, I'm guilty of it. I have 2 children myself, and if I'd have, you know, known now if I'd have known back then what I know now, I perhaps would have thought about having children. I don't think you would have.
This is the point. I mean, the impacts of CO2 in the atmosphere, which are denied by many for some inexplicable reason, were predicted 100 years ago. Now, if every scientist in the world had said, no, we can't do this, this is going to end in disaster, do you think anything would have changed? No, they'd have done exactly the same thing. And you only have to look at, this is one of the things that's rather remarkable about us as a species. We are a very, very special species, one who has a recorded history, the only species on Earth that has a recorded history, but one from which we refuse to learn. So look at all the great civilizations of the past. Virtually, and I might be going out on a limb here, but virtually all of them have come to an end because of the environment, because they took too much water, too many trees, farmed, etc. Whatever it happened, it's normally an environmental issue that caused that society to collapse and die out. We've survived as a species, and we're now global in our reach, absolutely global. And it will happen again. It will happen again. Now, we might be at the very beginning of that. We might be seeing the beginning of the global collapse of our civilization as it exists now.
Yeah.
It's almost unavoidable. It's like those reindeer that were introduced to an island off the coast of Alaska years ago by the Coast Guard in Canada or America who wanted to have things to shoot. And anyway, they introduced 42 reindeer or something onto this island, and then their circuit changed and they weren't able to go back to the island. So the animals expanded. They just got more and more and more, increased like this, until the carrying capacity of the island was far exceeded by the number of animals. And that year, in the autumn, they were trying to grow fatter, that all the lichen had gone away. Very hard, winter, crash. Population went, crashed the next year. 20 odd or 30 odd reindeer survived. Only one was male, and he was sterile. So that was it. End of the population of animals on that island.
Yeah.
When you, I'm not saying that's going to happen to us like that.
No.
But we might. Those guys that we used to laugh about, with the billboards, walking around saying the end is nigh. Actually, it might be nigher than you think.
Yeah, that's quite right. Yeah, not too far away.
Am I concerned? partly yes, partly concerned because it's avoidable. It was all avoidable, theoretically. Will we avoid it? Probably not. We're now still talking about oil licenses, which we probably shouldn't be issuing. We're talking about things like economic growth, which we probably shouldn't be talking about anymore. We should be talking about how do we achieve a steady state? How do we live in harmony with the environment? It's probably not possible now. But I do like insects. They're born survivors. I know we're seeing far fewer insects now, but insects will survive. Insects will see us off.
Oh, 100%.
In a cocked hat. I mean, they've been here for 350 million years. They'll be here for millions of years once we've shuffled off this mortal coil. So I feel rather glad about that. And if we ever find an exoplanet, if we can reach it, and evolution has progressed past the single cell stage, I am absolutely convinced that we will find things that look rather like insects. And I want a gravestone made out of the hardest known material. And on it should be inscribed a picture of a beetle and the words, "I told you so," underneath. So that if we survive to go anywhere else and destroy that as well, there'll be insects there. Perfect, or insect-like things.
Yes, yeah. Well, after a quick bite to eat in the local Plough and Sale, which was the hideout for many a smuggler, I believe, back in the day, George. I thought I'd bring you down to the site where the anchor of the actual beagle resides. Can you believe it?
I am finding it hard to believe. Not only have I had the most amazing trip to see the resting place of the beagle, this is the very anchor that kept it in place in the Straits of Magellan.
Yeah.
On that amazing voyage. This is it. I can actually touch it. I mean,
you go steady there.
That is just incredible. You're touching history there.
200 years old.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
And that was sat in a lady's front garden, a lady called Anne Bolter, who is a local woman who I believe is well into her 80s now. And she's actually done some pieces for BBC Radio in the archives, which are no longer available at the moment, which is highly frustrating. But she has been petitioning for years to try and raise funds to resurrect the beagle and to try and excavate it and do exactly what I think you're now going to spend the rest of your life trying to do.
One question, Joel. How did she get that into her garden?
She's a hefty woman.
That's pretty heavy.
I've no idea.
She must have had help.
But I think she brought it down here, so we're at one of the local playing fields in Paglesham, because I think she was worried that if somebody then bought the house after her where she was living, because she's a local lass, then it might have ended up down a scrapyard somewhere, or can you imagine?
Well, the more I see of this and the more I think about it, the more I realise that it's an absolute national scandal.
Travesty.
That we haven't got the remains of the beagle up, cleaned it off, put it on show. I mean, it is one of the most iconic ships, surely, in the history of human species.
Absolutely.
Of the human species.
Yeah, it is, and I think it's something that we will definitely. I'll do some more research into. I've been trying to pin down Anne. She's an elusive woman, I think, but we'll keep trying after this, and I'll see if I can maybe go and do an interview with her, because it would be fascinating to her, because if anybody knows about the beagle, it's this woman, and she even had relatives that were associated with it, so really quite astounding, and I think which will be a real shame to not document. I know she's done bits with the BBC as well, but be a real shame to not try and document it.
All we need is somebody with a lot of... Actually, it wouldn't cost that much. I mean, it wouldn't cost as much as, say, the Mary Rose, for instance.
No.
I mean, that ship just went out on its maiden voyage and fell over. I mean, it's not a very fantastic history, is it?
No, that's right.
This ship, the Beagle, really did something.
Yeah.
And it's quite a small ship. It wouldn't cost... I don't think it would cost that much. So if anybody out there has got money and wants to leave a legacy, a really important 100%. One, get behind this. Definitely.
Maybe more to come on that, we shall see. But so we left off a moment ago on doom and gloom and insects and all the rest of it.
Not all doom and gloom.
No, but mostly. But so when if we go back a minute, because I know this is, I'm quite conscious Darwin's stealing the limelight of this video here. And you are the main focus after all, George.
Really?
Yeah. Believe it or not.
It was the beagle.
Yeah, ignore that big bit of metal behind you.
Ignore the anchor.
So you went from, after your education, you then went to teach at Oxford.
Yes,
for many years.
Yeah, I was as
25 years.
Yeah, 25 years at Oxford University. Dream job number one. Teaching, research, curation, anything I wanted to do. In charge of the collections, fantastic. But I gradually began to do a bit more TV. So I would do, news items, and then I got asked to be the advisor on Attenborough's Undergrowth series. One of the early Life in the Undergrowth, which was all about the arthropods and vertebrates, mainly insects and spiders, of course. And I was the advisor on that. And I didn't really think much more about it until the BBC came up with a fantastic idea to do expeditions filmed as live in the field, in jungles.
Yeah.
And they assembled a team, and I was phoned up and they said, would you like to go along? At first I thought it'd be in some advisory capacity, but no, you're actually going to be on the show. You're part of the team out there. First one was called Expedition Borneo.
Yeah.
And it was shown as 5 parts across the week, stripped across the week, half-hour episodes. It went down very well. We went to an area of Borneo with a very high biodiversity, of course, and my job was to find good insects, good arthropods, and talk about them. It's not an easy game because it's unscripted. There's no script. So you need to be able to find something and talk about it, in a sensible way. Not just go, oh, it's a beetle,
Yeah.
Can I just go and have a check on my notes?
That's right.
So you do have to know enough, and you've got to be excited. I think if you can't be excited about what you're finding, you really shouldn't be doing it.
Of course, yeah.
Now that went very well. So the next year we did one, which was supposed to be called Expedition Guyana, obviously filmed in Guyana, on the other side of the world. But just before it went to air, and it was released as 3 one-hour episodes, somebody at the BBC said, "Oh, we don't like this Expedition Guyana title. Let's call it something else." And they said, "Let's call it the Lost Land of the Jaguar." Well, I wish we'd known it was going to be called that, because we didn't actually get much film of jaguars. In fact, there was only one little black and white image in a trap camera of a jaguar.
Right.
Although we saw them, I saw them. But we weren't able to actually get them on film. And of course the press suddenly said, "Lost Land of Jaguar? You mean the land of the lost jaguar? Because we didn't see any." Oh God! And that was it. But it went down very well. We then did what I thought was the most exciting, certainly the most dangerous, the most remote one, was filmed in Papua, New Guinea. That was Lost Land of the Volcano, and that really was an absolutely tremendous. We knew what we were doing. We knew what worked, what didn't work. We really were in the middle of nowhere, up inside a volcano, an extinct volcano, and a remarkable location, because this volcano, big stratovolcano, massive great thing, last erupted about 200,000 years ago, i.e. when humans were just beginning to walk out from Africa, to colonize the rest of the world. A remarkable place, and very few people, very few Westerners have ever been in the volcano. We at first thought that the people who live there, whose hunting grounds it is, wouldn't be very happy with us going there. But it turns out that they were perfectly happy about it. And they said the reason that we don't go in is that if we hunt something there, we have to drag it out again. So we got to climb up, go down, drag it out. So we just don't bother doing it, because we can hunt elsewhere,
Yeah.
So it was a very exciting show, very exciting. And all of these programs, the Lost Lands series, which were very, very popular, were done in a rather a new way. They were edited in a slightly different way, not like a conventional natural history film, which can be rather dull and a bit sort of, and here we found this and blah, blah, blah. This was edited a bit like an episode of EastEnders.
Yeah.
So our base camp...
They didn't get you swearing, did they?
No. Yes, but it was edited. So our base camp was the Queen Vic, if you like. And there were 3 teams going out at any time. I was doing insects, Steve Batch would be hunting for large vertebrates, Gordon would be doing other stuff. And then we'd come back in the evening, assemble what we'd found, talk about it, do various things, and off we went again. So it's a big crew in the field for 8 weeks, you know.
Wow,
so it's a big expenditure. But editing, and of course this is why editors get big salaries. It's not the director or the presenter or the cameraman, the editor, because they've got to take 300 hours of stuff and make it, craft it into 3 1-hour episodes, which tell the whole story. There's a lot of stuff that you didn't see, of course, because it was archived and then it didn't fit into that story. But what a fantastic series of films. We then did The Lost Land of the Tiger and one called The Dark, which was really difficult. Talk about making your job difficult. Film after dark.
Yeah.
So you got no light and you got to hunt for things in the dark, you know.
This is why my speciality is butterflies, because, you know, I can see them during the day.
Yeah, exactly.
Most of the moths.
One of the things that gives me and the rest of the team enormous joy is that so many people, 12, 13, 14-year-olds, saw that program, and that's the reason that they're in conservation, ecology, biology, zoology. Hundreds and hundreds of people, and I think that is a legacy that is incredibly powerful. The fact that these films, they're educational, they're entertaining, they were made to be entertaining, because if you don't entertain audiences, they don't learn anything.
No.
You've got to do both.
That's right.
But it makes people realise, it was, as it was supposed to do, highlight just how important these habitats are.
Yes.
And to encourage people, as indeed we have done, to become involved.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you're saying this, I'm thinking to myself, there must have been times, surely, when you were out filming these, where it must have had a slight Darwinian feel about it when you were out there, you know, traipsing through jungle and searching for insects. So did it ever cross your mind you'd want to be stood in front of a Darwin's or anchor talking to me, George, of all people? You know, I mean, honestly.
I really have to be honest about this. I am so lucky to have had not one dream job. The Oxford job was a dream job. But to then get involved in TV and to spend 15, 16 years, 18 years nearly making documentaries like The Expeditions and lots of other ones, you know, was the second dream job. Many people don't even get one dream job.
Sure.
So, I mean, I have been really lucky. And the reason I got involved in it was because I wanted to reach a bigger audience. I thought the stuff we were doing was so important that it had to get a wider audience. And let's be honest, it's children. You really got to get children hooked. Between the ages of 5 and 8, a child will learn more than will ever learn again. That's a critical period. Period. You fire them up, you light the blue touch paper, you stand back and you watch them go. You know, by the time they're 15, 16 and they've found girls and boyfriends and smartphones and all the games, you know, you're almost too late. You've really got to get them young. And especially now when we realise the world is sort of going to hell in a handcart, you know, we really need people to get on board and say, no, stop. This is not going to work out.
And I agree with you, because watching Attenborough growing up on the TV was half the reason I fell in love with wildlife, because it was just seeing the amazing diversity that this planet has to offer, and that, I think, is, as you've just described, me as a youngster.
You're absolutely right. I remember watching an Attenborough programme on TV when I was a kid. I mean, he was talking about spiders, and not only was he talking about spiders, and there was fantastic film with spiders, it was spiders having sex. Now, you know, I don't know how old I was, 12, 13, you know, not only was this quite an eye-opener, you know, I could still remember the words, and the male charges his palps with sperm and advances towards the female. I'm going, holy mackerel, they're going to have sex. I don't even know what sex is, but my God. This is exciting.
About this on television.
And it's a spider, and I but yeah, no, I mean, he really has been very instrumental.
Got a lot to answer for.
A lot of stuff. But I mean, he was in in the game when it started. I mean, he's virtually, so many people have grown up with him, and you know, he's still, you know, producing great stuff. You know, obviously he's not physically there. He does the VO, and you know, his voice has changed remarkably. If you look at the early stuff, and he was quite a young man with a slightly higher pitched voice, and of course as he's got older, his voice has got darker and slightly slower, and you know, as it should do. But you do actually, when you're doing a piece to camera and you're some exotic place like up a mountain somewhere, you do find yourself sort of slipping into the sort of Attenborough-esque delivery. You know, no, stop. I've got to do it my way.
Yes, of course.
But it's so easy to just go, I'm standing here, and then go, no, stop. But it's a great skill. It's a great skill.
Yeah, and I think his, we both had the fortune of interviewing him, and he, when I spoke to him, one of the things I will always remember is how excited and interested he got just talking about hummingbird hawk moths, and finding out they were in his home county of Leicestershire, of course, where he grew up. You know, I think it's easy for us to all relate to moments as a child, and so if you can instill those moments, or put those moments in a child's life early on, I think it really does have a big influence.
And get the kids involved. I mean, I think one of the nicest documentaries I made was all about the oak tree.
I was just going to ask about that.
You know, we've got fantastic wildlife here. We've got to protect it. We've got to look after it more. We're certainly facing a challenge in the UK.
Yeah.
And we've just got to face up to the fact that things are not nearly as abundant as they were when I was a kid. I remember driving, anybody in the 60s and older will remember driving a car and the front of the windscreen is just plastered in insects. It never happens now, because there are just a lot less flying insects than there ever were. Even growing up in Edinburgh, when we drove to Oban to go to the Western Isles on a holiday, and the front of the windscreen will be plastered. You can drive in Oxfordshire or Berkshire for a whole summer, you don't get hardly anything. So I think we really need to look at hedgerows. We need to look at set aside rewilding, or I know some people don't like the phrase rewilding, but you know, putting back the natural world. Not all we got to do is stop doing things that hurt it. You know, do things in a different way. You know, we can accommodate both.
And I think the thing is, I mean, people say it all starts with insects, and I agree with that. The pyramid starts with insects, but actually it starts with the plants, doesn't it? Because the animals aren't there, or the insects aren't there without that plant structure, because they're feeding on something, whether it's a hoverfly, a moth, a butterfly, a bee. They're feeding on something to give them the energy to go about doing what they do to pollinate everything else. And whether that's a tree, whether that's a shrub, whether that's a wildflower. So if we're mowing everything, I can hear the sound of a hedge cutter in the background, and if we're mowing everything and flailing everything twice a year, and things aren't flowering and there's no flowers, it's quite simple. There's no real, you know, complex formula to all of this.
We've got to put the natural world at the heart of everything we do. That is abundantly clear. Our livelihoods, our well-being depends on the natural world. You cannot say anything else. That's just a simple fact. Our well-being, our health, our economy even depends on it. So, you know, why in God's name are people flailing hedges too often, too hard, at the wrong time of year? You know, it's criminal, actually. You know, it's.
Well, we could do a whole video on.
You could do a whole thing on hedgerows. I mean, I remember hedgerows being under threat when I was growing up, and I thought, well, we'll surely sort this out. We haven't. It's got
We've lost 250,000 miles of them.
Yeah, absolutely appalling. And hedgerows are almost a quintessentially English habitat.
That's right.
But they are now vitally important as wildlife corridors to join up little patches of surviving ancient woodland or copses. Without them, it's a disaster area. I mean, an absolute disaster area. So green belt should be fully protected. Ancient woodland, SSSIs. And there's hardly a week goes past that we don't learn about some bit of green belt that's been swallowed up, or oh well, it's a economic development, or some hedgehog's been flailed so hard it dies out, and they might well put a fence in. And then ancient woodlands, well, we'll plant some oak trees. That's not the same thing. Planting 100 oak saplings is not replacing.
You could plant 1,000 and it wouldn't replace one ancient oak tree, would it?
It's not replacing it at all, nor it will do for 1,000 years.
It's one thing that I know yourself and myself have been very vocal on Twitter about. I've said to a lot of people who have had a bit of a pop about, well, that's fine, HS2's all right, we can just, plant lots of trees. And my response is you can't simply plant your way out of that kind of eco-side, if you know what I mean. To have that mass felling of ancient trees, it's just
insanity. And you don't need a mass planting either.
No.
What you need is to let natural woodlands regenerate and spread out. But we won't do it.
No.
We almost certainly won't do it.
I blame the Victorians a little bit for our over-management of lawns and, instilling in us that sort of management and the maintenance of a green space, which shouldn't exist if we want nature to thrive. One of the things, going back to the oak tree, because I'd love to touch on that for a moment, the series, because I think it was absolutely wonderful. I remember watching that and just thinking, wow, a year as an oak tree. And I actually got really upset when the local council here, Rochford District Council, I'm sure they won't mind me naming them, took down a 100-plus-year-old oak tree outside the primary school, just a half a mile from where I live. Because there's a new build housing estate going in with 600 new houses opposite the school, and they wanted to add a turning lane in the centre of the road. It was just a two-way street, so they put in a turning lane, and to do that meant digging up the pavement and extending the road into the pavement where the children would sit after school in the shade under the oak tree on the street and wait for their parents to come and pick them up.
And it wasn't beyond the width of the planners.
They had other accesses.
To redesign it.
If you've got a plot of land that can fit 600 houses, I'm sure there's more than one option for access.
Of course.
But that's the mentality, and I won't go on too much.
It's laziness and stupidity.
And when you look at how the Japanese deal with situations like that, and they dig up entire trees, and they spend far less time than we would spend engineering and moving a tree.
Don't waste time moving it. Just redesign the entrance so you don't have to cut down ancient trees.
Anyway, tell me about that series, because it was
really
series.
Fantastic. It was a one-off. It was an hour and a half program, a year in the life of an oak tree, and everything that happens to it. The oak tree is an iconic species in British.
This was about 8 years ago or so now, wasn't it?
It must be 2016, yeah. And we filmed this one tree in Whiton Woods in Oxfordshire. About a 400-year-old tree. We scanned it, we found out how many leaves it had, we found out how much water it sucked up in a year, how much oxygen it produced, how much wood it accumulated. And of course trees are just the most vital and essential parts of our community. But of course trees began to be felled as soon as we started agriculture. That was it. We've now, the world had lost probably a third of the trees it ever had, and more and more are being lost. And guys, they suck up carbon. I was on a train heading from Ascot into Waterloo, and there were two very young, earnest engineers talking about carbon capture and how exciting it was, and what's the best way to get carbon out of the air. Oh, you could do this technique and we could do this, and I'm listening to them arguing all the pros and cons of each mechanical device that might suck carbon out there. And as we got off the train, I turned to them and said, trees. They said, what? Carbon capture? Trees. That's what you need, more trees. It's like that bit in John Wick, where the guy says, what do you need, John? Guns, lots of guns. Okay, we need trees, lots of trees. And that's what we need. So stop trying to invent your way out of this problem. Just get the trees to grow. One of the solutions.
Absolutely.
But I mean, what a tree. Our history, the recorded history of the Western Hemisphere, recorded with an ink made from oak galls, produced by a wasp that lays its egg in the buds of an oak tree, produces a gall, which when you grind it up with gum arabic and iron filings or whatever they use, it makes an indelible ink. Well, I mean, that's recorded 1,000 years of our history, which we wouldn't otherwise have.
Yeah, yeah.
Fantastic.
No,
Buildings, all the buildings. It protected us. The Beagle. The Beagle. You know, oak. I mean, you know, and there have been some fantastic people in history. Vice Admiral Cuthbert Collingwood, who would go around and plant acorns everywhere he went. He'd have a pocket full of acorns, he'd plant it and tramp it down because he knew that trees would be needed for the Navy. Well, of course, eventually they weren't needed. Yeah. And yeah, so he did plant a few thousand trees.
Yeah.
Good lad.
Good lad. That's what we all need to be doing.
Yeah,
absolutely. Guerrilla planting.
Absolutely.
Plant up all our local parts. And
plant some acorns up to get them growing.
That's it.
And look after them. What really makes me annoyed is when people plant hedges or plants and then they don't look after them. And then they die. They plant acres of trees in straight lines. Hey, job done. No, your job's just started, mate. You now have to water them, look after them. Otherwise, you just wasted your money.
We have that down the end of our road. You know, there's a new build housing estate gone up and they paid God knows how much money for specimen trees. Nobody maintained them, and 18 months later they've all died. And now they've come in and replanted specimen trees, and I'm thinking, well, another 18 months, I'll see you again, lads. You know, and it's just
we just do not value, we do not appreciate the value and importance of the natural world. But for the natural world, we simply don't exist.
Of course, yeah. So George, yes, it's not the only TV you've done. You've also done the One Show.
Yes, I was one of the early reporters.
Episodes.
I started 16 years ago, 17 years ago. I was one of the first regular reporters on the show when it began. And over the 15 years I was involved with it, I think we made something like 95 short films about some of the most wonderful, rare, weird, fantastic wildlife, insect wildlife. So I did insects and spiders.
Yeah.
Other people did the birds and the other animals. But it was I was very proud of those films because it was a vehicle like no other on TV, where you could get natural history, the beauty and just fantasticness of the animal world on screen for 3 minutes, 4 minutes, and filmed beautifully in a day, edited beautifully to a 3-minute film.
Is that sort of drip feeding, isn't it?
Just to... Yeah, you know, and they would have you on where it would lead from an earlier, you know, story. And George had been out hunting for it, and you got to the film. So they really were very good. About 2 years ago, the One Show studio decided that they weren't making any more of those, so it basically stopped.
Yeah, it's a shame.
It was a great shame, and I think the show is poorer for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
well, I would say that, wouldn't I?
Well, of course.
Oh, I don't have a job.
You're not there anymore. So let's touch on some of the other TV then, because I mean I know you've got a list.
Dissection, Hands and Feet, Planet Ant, The Secret Life of Sewage, Secret Life of Landfill. That was.
Oh, because you were down here, weren't you?
I filmed a bit here actually. Yeah.
And that was quite an eye opener.
Well, quite an eye opener. We filmed at Walsey Island, which is
a stone's throw that away.
Not very far from here, and a fantastic evidence of how land that's been reclaimed, and you try and fight the sea. You can't fight the sea. No, you can't fight it. No. It's going to win. It's going to win. Doesn't matter what wall you put up. It's going to win.
Yeah.
And a much better thing is to let the sea reclaim what it owns, re-wet that once arable land into a bog or marsh, where it's brilliant for wildlife and plants and birds and insects, and also it decreases the chance of floods and problems elsewhere. So, you know, don't fight it, go with it. And that's what in a way, that's what we've been doing for so long. We've been fighting the natural world. And it never works. It never works. So you've got to go with the flow.
Yes.
And also, I filmed at a landfill site on the Thames estuary where in the 60s they had just found a piece of land, dumped batteries and all sorts of household waste, thousands of tons of it, hundreds of thousands of tons, compacted it, put soil over it, that's it, forget. But of course, the Thames estuary has widened, it's washed away all the banks, and now all this stuff is coming back. You know, it's falling out of the sea cliff, you know, and there's all sorts of really horrible stuff that was just forgotten about. There's no way.
No.
You don't hide it, it will come back.
Yes,
and I think the realization that there are so many of these relatively unprotected landfills around the country, where in the past it was just dig a big hole, stuff it in, forget about it. No, you can't do that.
No,
you can't do that.
And yeah, I quite agree. But I suppose it's that thing, isn't it, of how we deal with our commercial waste. I mean, I've recently come back from a visit to Slovenia, which is just steeped in natural history and nature. Wherever you go, it's a wonderful place. Of course there's farming, of course there's towns, of course there's cities. I'm not saying it's just one massive woodland and scrub and meadow, but it's incredible, because I was reading about Ljubljana, and obviously it's only been the Republic of Slovenia since 91, but since then they've managed to transform themselves so that 95% of their waste is now recycled.
Wow.
within the city of Ljubljana, and they even impose fines now, because they have various bins that you can put all your rubbish in. They provide you with the disposal of a piece of rubbish, whatever it may be, but if you put it in the wrong bin, there's an €800 fine if they catch you doing it, which might sound extreme.
I don't think it's extreme,
but I think it's a good way of, it would certainly get you thinking, wouldn't it? About
it certainly would get you thinking.
Everything that every packet you opened, every bottle you opened, what happened to that after you finished with it?
We have to think about that. I do remember seeing the first advert made by DuPont for a toothbrush.
Yeah.
And it was a man holding a toothbrush going, brushing his teeth. And it said, "Last for 7 years." Well, you wouldn't want to brush your teeth with it for 7 years. It wouldn't be worth doing it. But the plastic lasts for 700 years.
Yes.
And we're now at the point where we find plastic everywhere. Absolutely everywhere. It's in our blood, in our flesh, in our bone, in every part of the natural world. Even the deep sea ocean trenches have got microplastics.
Yeah.
We never thought about it. It was such a good idea. I remember at school seeing, films made by Shell and BP, plastics, it's the future. We're going, oh, it's amazing, fantastic. Actually, nobody thought about what to do with the stuff.
That's right, yeah.
Because it doesn't break down.
Sure.
Biology might get us out of that hole. There might be bacteria and stuff that might be able to use, but we should just be reining it. The amount of plastic produced on a global basis yearly is horrendous. Billions of tons, of metric tons, and most of it. Now here brings me on to something else, that England's green and pleasant land. Any lane, even the one we drove down to get here, to look at this anchor, bottles, cans, wrapping, plastic in the hedgerows. I still cannot understand, especially in beauty spots, why people go, and they must be doing it, obviously, take their kids, they go to a beauty spot, a beach, they go because it's beautiful, presumably.
Yeah.
That's all you can assume. They want to be there, they like it.
That's right.
And they leave behind gallons of stuff, of disposable barbecues, hidden in the sand, bottles, cans, fag ends, Do they imagine that somebody will always come and take it away for them? I mean, they brought it, why can't they take it home with them?
That's right.
I remember at school, though, it was Clean Britain, Keep Britain Tidy campaigns.
Yeah.
It's worse than it ever was.
Yes,
What is wrong with people? I mean, I followed a guy in a car for 5 miles because I saw them throwing out something on there. I saw red. I just saw red.
I did the same thing.
And I followed this guy for about 2 miles, flashing my headlights and sounding the horn. He was getting really scared by this point, and he turned up. He was trying to avoid me. Come on, guys, don't do it. Take it home with you. Yeah. And I wish we could impose fines. Not token fines, swinging fines, fly tipping. Do it once, you're out of business.
That's right.
You're out of business. End of story. And these people who give money to a guy with a van who says, "I'll get rid of your waste for you," knowing full well that getting rid of the waste means throwing it in a hedgerow 5 miles up the road, and going, 50 quid in the bank, thanks very much. No, this is criminal. Yeah. This is criminal.
It's interesting because I spoke to, I'm not going to keep banging on about Slovenia, but
no,
it's obviously quite fresh in my mind, but I spoke to a lady about this, a Slovenian lady, when we were out there. We'd just been walking through these pristine meadows, and I know it's sort of a slightly different landscape where I was, so I can't exactly make an exact comparison to the UK, but the attitude of, as you're saying, the people of all ages, not just the younger generation, but people of all ages, to physically throw something out of a car window and expect someone else to clear it up and not have that responsibility. I mentioned this to her because she said, "Oh, how do you like Slovenia?" I said, "Love it, absolutely beautiful, pristine." I said, "I've not seen one bit of rubbish on the roads, in the city, anywhere. I can't see a bottle or a can or a crisp packet."
Yeah.
She said, "Well, that's because," she said, "we respect our country." She said, and this is a woman who's in her 70s. She said, "And we teach children from an early age that it is disrespectful."
But we've been doing that in Britain.
Yeah, but I can't understand why that's so hard to comprehend. So, I mean, I don't know what.
I tried it once. I actually tried. I said to my wife, I said, "Right, I'm just going to drop this, crisp packet, not crisp, don't eat crisp, chip packet on the ground." And I couldn't do it. I couldn't actually let go of the paper.
No.
And yet, now I'd like to bring the conversation back to Darwin, actually, if I may.
Of course, yeah.
And that is Britain, the Britain that Darwin knew, and that's not that long ago.
No, a couple hundred years.
Was a different place to it is now. Is it still a green and pleasant land? Well, it's not, because according to research that was done 4 or 5 years ago, Britain is now in the bottom 12% of countries worldwide in terms of how intact the biodiversity is.
Yeah.
We are at the bottom of the class.
Yeah.
When I learned about the research, I couldn't believe it what I was hearing. You can fondly imagine that things are okay, but they're not okay.
That's right.
Bottom 12%. So Darwin would have been, if he was alive today, would have been absolutely horrified.
Yeah. And not only that, it was only 2020, I think we were the worst, most polluted river system in Europe.
Yeah, well,
don't
start me on that.
Probably even worse.
Don't start me on that.
Well, anyway, you've done a lot of TV, George. I'd like to come on to these.
Yeah.
Here's 2 I found earlier. 2 of George's books, of which there are many. How many books have you written now, George?
I think it's about 14, 15, something like that.
Not bad. So we have 2 with us here today. The Hidden World. Tell us about that one, George, first.
Well, the Hidden World was a book I wanted to write just about.
It says here, there's some David Attenborough bloke.
Yeah.
George McGavin is a rarity.
Oh, thanks, David.
Is that a compliment or is that?
That's a compliment.
It is.
I think what he actually said, because it was in an interview, because in the book we have recorded interviews which have been transcribed into the book from lots of eminent individuals,
yes,
Attenborough included. And I think he said something like, "George, people like you are a rarity." And I thought, I'll have that on the front cover. So he didn't actually say those exact words, but pretty damn close. Anyway, and it's about how small things run the world, basically.
Yes.
And why I have found it so fascinating, my life's work, to understand it and to share it. I think that's important. I think, it's all very good being fascinated and intrigued and lock yourself in your office and do whatever you want, but you've got to share it. You've got to get it out there. And if you don't get it out there, who's going to learn? Who's going to know?
That's it. Yes.
So, yeah, I mean, this
and
is
you've
about...
got to look at examples like termites, the way that they have their whole own cooling systems to keep the centre of the chamber cool.
So much.
Stuff like that. It's fascinating, isn't it?
So much. And it's just about why the small stuff, we should really sweat the small stuff. And yet audiences want vertebrate animals. They want big hairy things, furry things, feathery things. Vertebrate animals only make up less than 3% of all species on Earth.
Yeah.
Less than 3%. The majority of animals are invertebrates.
Yeah.
Which are all around us, or they used to be. So that book's about them.
Brilliant. And then next we have The Good Bug.
Yeah, that was...
Which looks
I don't like the word
read.
bug, because I had an argument with the editors. I said, look, are you talking about Hemiptera? Are you talking about bugs with a sucking mouth part? Or are you talking American bugs, like bugs, which are like everything invertebrate? Anyway, I had to give in eventually, because this book follows on from one they did a couple of years ago called The Good Bee, and so they wanted a follow-up called The Good Bug. And basically it's an extension of this, talking specifically about insects and how how they shape our lives, basically, and how, you know, the attitude to insects is a peculiar one. Many people like butterflies, like yourself. They're friendly, they're okay. Bees are furry, they're nice, they're sort of honorary mammals, you know, because they're furry. You know, not all of them, of course. But then you talk about horseflies and people, oh, mosquitoes, oh, midges. I love midges. I talk about the Highland midge being a godsend for Scotland because without the Highland midge, the whole of Scotland would be built up now. It would be condominiums, golf courses from end to end.
People.
Yeah, end to end. But because of the Highland midge, they go, nah, I'll just come here for a holiday and I'll go. So, and large parts of Canada are uninhabitable because of blood-feeding insects. You know, not just horseflies and mosquitoes and midges. There's lots of other things there. So there are large parts of the summer. If you go more than 100 miles north of the US border, you literally can't go outdoors. You got to be completely encased in nets and veils and gloves. Otherwise, you'll lose half a pint of blood.
Yeah, but they are providing a food source for many, many, many animals.
Essential. This is it's an attempt to get people to say, and this book is for people who don't like insects. Actually, you know, it's as it says here, perfect for people who love insects or hate them alike, because it does show you how important they are. You know, people say, well, what about mosquitoes? Get rid of mosquitoes, you know, they'll be all right. Well, yes and no. Okay, you'd lose some diseases, but mosquito larvae and adults are an incredibly rich food source for many aquatic species, many other species.
Many people watching this at Wildlife Pond, and they're going to be providing
you can't have a house of cards built out of species interacting and say, well, I don't like this one, I'm just going to take that card out, you know, or that one, because oh dear, collapse, you know. So you've just got to just love the natural world. I do think we've got ourselves into a position where we want to almost insulate ourselves from the natural world. We want it's a bit like gardens. Some gardens, not your gardens, but some gardens, you know, it's a bit like fence up. Natural world out here, don't come in. This is what I want. I don't want anything that might provide wildlife for buzzy things. So I'm going to have a nice artificial lawn, some concrete planters, and great.
And some fake bushes.
And fake bushes. That's a disaster. That is an absolute disaster. Why are we scared of the natural world? I don't know. I don't know is the answer. Obviously, some things do sting and bite. Yes.
Sure.
But get over yourselves already.
Yeah. So I think you've probably
good bug.
Yeah. So, and where can people get any of your books from? Where do
any
you
good bookshop? Yes.
Very good. Very good.
Even that place that begins with A, that the guy is so rich. Actually, the guy who runs the big internet seller that begins with A, could you give us, say, 10 million for the Beagle? I mean, we could get it up for that. I'm pretty sure we could get it up for that. And we wouldn't call it the so and so Beagle. It would have to be called something else. Not. Yeah. You know. But anyway, you know, if you got loads of money like that, do something decent with it. Yeah. Stop sending rockets into space for self-aggrandizement. Let's get the Beagle up. Sorry.
It's all right. No, I completely agree. Yeah. So
what's it called again? Jeff somebody.
Yeah, Bezos. Anyway, so going from the books, George, obviously they're all about insects. Why insects? Why entomology? What is it that really? Well, I know, but what you know from when you were a child?
Seriously asking me this question?
I know, but Mickey, you could have gone down the bird route. You could have gone down the butterfly route. You could have been salty dragonflies. Instead, you could have been an archaeologist. You know, an astronaut, as you said. But
they're what makes the world work. I mean, they've been around for over 350 million years. First animals on land, first animals in the air. They build ecology. They are what makes habitats work, ecosystems work. We arrive, you know, 250,000 years, screw the whole thing up, you know, and go, oh, why should we worry about insects? You know. And they're more interesting. One of the things that I find rather remarkable is the life cycles of insects are so strange, some of them. I mean, literally weird stuff. And yet people are obsessed with, you know, lions and meerkats, you know, big cat diary. I mean, God, Lions are tedious. They're so dull. I mean, anybody who's got a domestic cat will know that cats spend most of the time doing nothing.
Yes.
Asleep. The rest of the time eating something, perhaps having sex. That's few and far between, you know, and you've got to edit several hundred hours of big cats to make anything remotely interesting. And yet, look at the sex lives, the natural history, the behaviour of insects. You couldn't believe what's going on.
I must admit, it's why I am fascinated with butterflies, because, and I know, you know, there's many species that metamorphosize into, you know, different beings, but when when you think about that process, and you think about something liquefying itself within a shell, and the only two things are the brain and the heart that stay
there's a few groups of cells that remain, little groups of cells that
and then they rebuild themselves,
around which the rest of the animal, we still don't know how that works, and that's been going on for hundreds of millions of years, trillions of quintillions of times. And yet we're just beginning to work out how that happens. You know,
and I think that's why I love them so much, because you then twin that with the life cycle, and you think to yourself, particularly, I mean, we're fortunate enough that we don't really have any predators ourselves, apart from ourselves.
That's it. We've killed them all.
But when you think about something like a butterfly or an insect or an ant or whatever it may be, you think of how many things are trying to eat you on a daily basis. And when I learnt about butterflies, obviously very early on as a child, and the life cycle, and then when I started really looking into them many years ago, and I realised that actually they've got to survive that egg stage, and to survive that egg stage, they've got to survive parasitisation from,
and the parasitoids, they're amazing.
And the parasitoids that parasitize the other parasitoids. Anyway, and then it just goes down into like microscopic, doesn't it?
So exciting.
But when I learned that they have to survive that as the egg, not be eaten by snails and slugs that are eating the eggs, for example, like you guys in the States have the cabbage whites, we have the small white, the same butterfly here. Its egg is laid on a cabbage leaf, and those tiny little eggs on the underside of the leaf are hoping and praying that they don't get munched up by a snail or a slug or anything else, or a bird pecking them off, a wren or long-tailed
or a small wasp so tiny that it lays its egg inside their egg, and it has enough resource to make a wasp.
Yes, absolutely. And then when they hatch, they're then a big juicy caterpillar. Well, that opens you up into the birding world, doesn't it? So then they then go through that, and then they have to rely on camouflage to spend several months, a lot of the time, as this chrysalis. There's a peacock flying around us there, and then they have to survive as a butterfly long enough, and in the British weather, which isn't the best at the best of times, like things like the Duke of Burgundy, for example, the males live on average for 4 days. They have no mouth parts to feed. They emerge in early May, and you try being a butterfly in early May with overcast, rainy conditions, finding a female for 4 days, mating, and then managing to repopulate. So it's just, that's what fascinates me about butterflies. I know they're not the only ones with a difficult life cycle, or they have to, everything is trying to avoid predation apart from us. So it's incredible.
It's all about survival.
Yeah, absolutely. While we're on that topic, what's your favourite butterfly?
Why do people always ask me this?
Well,
it's not favourite butterfly. It's favourite, insect. They say, "What's your favourite insect?" And I go,
I couldn't say that.
God.
No, that's too.
It's very difficult. I mean, it's very, very difficult. I mean, what do I say? The blue, the big morpho butterfly.
You could do. All right, British butterfly. Let's narrow it
British
down.
butterfly. Oh, okay. No.
You've got a whole 56. Oh, very good. Nice. Yeah.
What?
It's a beautiful butterfly.
I don't see it very often now. Peacock, purple emperor. I love the way the Victorians would lure the purple emperor down from the tree with the entrails of a dead cat.
Yeah,
so
I've done that, but just not with a cat. There was shrimp paste, I think it was, or something.
Shrimp paste, was it? Yeah. But no, I mean, I don't really have a favorite insect, or even a favorite insect group. I mean, obviously bees are probably one of the most essential groups. 100 million years ago, interaction between the flowering plants and insects produced this rich diversity of bees, and other insects obviously are involved in this. But bees as a global group, 22,000 species in the UK, 258 species. Most people wouldn't even know there was over 100 species of bees
Yeah.
in the UK, but there we are. We got things that don't even look like bees that
Yes.
are bees. So they are essential organisms, and we are really using so much pesticide and so often now that it's hard to see how anything can survive, really. And these pesticides we're using are not magic pesticides. They are thousands of times more toxic than the pesticides of old.
Yeah.
And although they might be more targeted, i.e. they won't affect mammals or birds or fish, they kill insects, period.
Yeah.
End of story. And that
Yeah.
they last for a long time, and they get into the waterways, and your dog that may have a fipronil anti-flea treatment of it, the minute that thing dives into a pond to chase a bird, oh, look at the dog, isn't it cute? It's just shedding, a lot of pesticide into that thing,
Yeah.
into that pond, which is going to kill most of the insects in that pond.
Yes.
Bang,
Yeah.
that's it.
Yeah.
So
Because it's so potent.
we just don't know what we're doing, really, and we think we can just poison and scrim and build forever. We can't.
Yes. Yeah.
And the sooner we realise this and do things differently, the better it will be.
Yeah. And that's what I hope to achieve with this channel. Now, I know a lot of people would say, well, I've only got a little garden, I can't make a difference. But I think if you have, said one of hundreds of thousands of people, but if you had lots of these joined up as a patchwork quilt, you're obviously going to have
It's
a big
the area. I mean,
Yeah.
the area of gardens in the UK is something like 500,000 hectares.
Yeah.
9 times, 10 times greater than all the national nature reserves added together. So of course it's going to have an effect.
Yes,
And the more slug pellets and pesticide you use, the more artificial lawn, the more concrete borders and blooming decking and all the rest of it, the less insects you're going to have.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't want to sit in a garden that looks like it's dead, because I mean,
Yes.
I've seen some really horrendous things.
Yeah.
Just horrendous.
Yeah.
But
And now you've
people
seen,
like it, apparently.
Well, some people, yes.
Some
yeah,
people.
quite. And so now you've
I
briefly
know where you
seen.
live, by the way.
Yeah.
I'm
He's
coming,
coming
for you.
Yeah.
Coming for you.
And now you've briefly seen my front wildlife garden this morning.
It's
What
very
do you
small.
think about that?
Very small,
Tiny, isn't it?
lots of flowers, lots of nice things.
Pond.
Pond, they're not weeds. I mean, people say weeds. I hate the word weed.
Well, I don't know if you noticed, but the star of the show at the moment
Wildflower.
is the front corner of my garden. I've
Yeah.
got a ginormous spear thistle.
Yeah.
How many people would be
Yeah.
championing a spear
They're
thistle?
not.
in the
They're not weeds. They're wildflowers. And the sooner we get. And the other word I hate is pests.
Mm.
They're no pests. They're not pests. They're wild, species.
Yeah.
They might be eating what we want.
That's right.
Mainly because we grow them in vast acreages, so it's very hard for them to avoid seeing it. But you can't then call them all pests.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's a whole attitude. It's a whole attitude, and it starts young. You got to get them. You got to think about the natural world in a different way. The natural world keeps us alive, all of it.
Yes.
Health, well-being, economics, the lot.
Yeah.
Without it, we are toast.
Yes, absolutely. So, George, for the many people watching this who are clearly interested in wildlife, or you, obviously, I'm hoping they've clicked on this just because it's got your name in the title, which I'm sure many people will. What would be some advice for people wanting to attract wildlife, in particular insects, to their garden? What would you recommend? Let's assume they've got a modest-sized garden, or
Any size garden.
Any size, yeah.
I'd say neat and tidy, no. Bugs don't like, insects don't care about neat and tidy. You do.
Yeah.
You need flowers that pollinators like. And if you really don't know, and there's masses of stuff on the web, what bees like, the flowers to plant so you get flowers throughout the whole year without a bare patch and without a patch that has no flowers, go to the garden centre. In summer, look at what the bees like. They're all swarming around that one. Buy that one. The ones that have got big double fancy flowers that are hybrids, they don't want them, so don't buy
Or
them.
go to the wildgarden.com online.
Go to the wildlife garden. Yeah, have a pond. Have a small pond, just a small pond. Wet patch is very, very good. Leave a bit of your garden untidy, and I mean untidy. Long grass. Bumblebees like to nest in long grass. They don't like a cut lawn.
Yeah.
So get used to there being what you might have thought of in the past as weeds, they're not weeds, let them grow. I mean, some of the most beautiful flowers you can find in the garden are things that most conventional gardens would remove, like toadflax, dandelions, essential spring food for bees.
Yeah.
And yet, up and down the country, as soon as the dandelions are out, the strimmers are out. The bees are having a hard enough time as it is.
Yeah.
So let the dandelions grow.
Yes.
If you've got a green lawn that is emerald green with no weeds in it, you're using pesticides, you're using fertilizer, or it's an artificial lawn. Either way, it's not what you want. You've really got a dead wood. Have some dead wood lying around.
Yes,
Don't tidy it up. And I know lots of people who have a large garden. They have just simply let it grow, and they cut a path through what was the lawn, and the rest of it is just glorious. Wildflowers and shrubs, humming with insects. That would give me joy.
Yeah.
It's not for everybody, but sadly, but that's what you need to do if you want to attract wildlife.
Yeah, and it's just about changing perspectives, isn't it, on what a garden should or can be. I shouldn't say should be. I'm not telling people what to do with a garden, but I think if we can try and persuade people that they don't have to look like X, like they have done for the last 100 years, 150 years, or whatever. We are changing the norm. And
if you haven't got an idea of what to do, employ Joel Ashton here, who'll come down and he'll plan your wildlife garden for you for a small consideration, I'm sure.
I will indeed. Yes, thank you, George. Yeah. Well, I mean, I hope you've enjoyed today.
I have loved it, Joel. I absolutely loved it. I mean, I never thought I'd get to see the resting place, the Beagle, touch the Beagle's anchor, and I'm now fired up to get this hulk, this remaining bit of the hull, out of the ground. Wouldn't that be a fantastic thing to do?
Wouldn't it just? Yeah.
We need money.
It's a crying shame.
We need money. Yeah. In the words of Bob Geldof, give us your effing money.
Couldn't have put it better myself.
No. It worked for him.
Yeah, quite. Well, no, thank you, George. I really, really appreciate you coming down. It's a long way for you to come, and I hope that the food today has partly benefited you in terms of a bit of repayment. But also, I hope that many people will have watched this, will learn more about or an understanding about the natural world in terms of our insects and why they are important. Because I think that's exactly what we're trying to show on this channel, is that it all starts with the plants and the insects. They are the same. They are the basis.
No, they're not the same. The plants are green things, Dougal, and insects are the animal, Dougal. Right, get that.
I've had this all day.
Yes.
All right, they're on the same level.
Yeah, no, they're not.
Same
one's lower below. One's lower. Come on. Primary producers, right? Then.
Yes. Well, I mean, George and I will probably continue this debate for some time. But
I'm winding you up. They're both important.
Yeah, it has been a pleasure. And I can't believe it's taken this long to see you in flesh. We've been planning this interview.
A year at least.
Well over a year. Yeah. But you've been busy. I've been busy. That's life.
Busy boys.
So, yeah. But thank you. And any last words of wisdom?
Love your bugs. In the broad sense, that is.
I love it. Well, thank you for watching. If you're still with us at this point, hats off to you. So I hope you've enjoyed today's video, and I hope you've learnt a bit about the famous Beagle and just why I had to bring this man to this part of Essex to conduct this interview, because I think there's a few things that George and Charles Darwin share in common, and that is a massive love for the insect and the natural world. And thank you so much for watching. Obviously, if you've enjoyed the video, feel free to hit that subscribe button and the like button, and do drop some comments below. I'm sure George will love to see just how many fans he's got around the world.
Yeah, only the good ones.
Yeah. I'll delete the rest, don't worry. George, thanks so much again.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching. We'll see you all soon. Bye. Cheers.